Good day, children. Sai Ram. Welcome back to our online class. And today we are going to continue our lesson number 7, adaptations in plants in science subject. Now let's quickly do a recap of what we learned in our part 2 video. So do you all remember what did we learn in part 2? Yes, we learnt about the terrestrial plants. There are different kinds of terrestrial plants. We learnt about the plants in deserts. So, you know what is the specialty of the plants that lives in the desert? Yes, the plants like the cactus, the roots that spread under the surface of the soil where the water is available, so it can spread, it can grow down more than 220 meters in search of water, right? So the most of the soil in the deserts are dry. Soil in the deserts are dry, and there is very little water because it rarely rains there, but yet plants live and survive in the deserts. And I also showed you a type of plant. Yes, mesquite bush. Mesquite bush. So it has roots. Can you see the roots here? It has roots that grow down to more than 20 meters in search of water. So these plants, they grow in the desert region, and desert plants they always have the small leaves. They always have the small leaves, and the leaves of the cactus are very sharp and they have spines on that. So when we touch, you will get hurt. So the cactus stores water in its thick stem. Okay. So instead of the leaves, the thick green stem of the cactus makes food. And we also learned about the plants in the hills. So in the hilly region, the place is very cold. So the plants that grow there, they have to adapt the cold and snow. So these plants that grow on the hills, they are usually very tall. They are usually very tall and straight. They don't have many branches. They grow very tall and straight. So instead of flowers, they have cone. Instead of flowers, they have cones. So they are called as conifers. So they are called as conifers. So this is the cone. So instead of flowers, they have cones. So they are called as conifers. And these cones, what do they have? They have seeds in them. Seeds in them. And conifers have needle-like leaves that are very tough, and they can survive in cold and snow. And the sloping shape of the sloping shape, the trees are this shape. The sloping shape of the trees make the snow to fall off them easily. The snow falls out easily. So for the example, the pine, the spruce, the cedar and the fir are the coniferous trees. So if they ask you the example of coniferous trees, what you will give? Pine tree, spruce tree, cedar tree and the fir tree. So this is the spruce tree, pine, cedar tree and the fir tree. So these are the examples of evergreen trees. They are always green in color. They do not shed their leaves throughout the year. From January to December, they will not shed their leaves. So they are called as evergreen trees. So examples of evergreen trees are cedar tree, fir trees, pine, spruce. Are these are the trees for the example, they are the examples of evergreen trees. So they look green throughout the year. And we also learned about the, yes, this oak tree and maple tree, birch tree, and the beech trees. They all shed their leaves. They all shed their leaves in winter to protect themselves from the cold. They shed all their leaves. Can you see any leaves here? No, they shed all their leaves. But here, evergreen trees, throughout the year, they are green in color and they never shed their leaves. But here, these oak tree, they shed their leaves in the winter season, all their leaves, and new leaves grow in the spring season. So they are called as deciduous trees. They are called as deciduous trees. Now let us continue the chapter. Now let's see plants in the plains. So let us learn about the plants that grow in the plains. So trees growing in the plains have lots of spreading branches. Have you seen the mango tree and the banyan tree? They have lots of branches. So these trees grow on plains. Plains means a level land. Where does the mango tree grow, banyan tree grow? On the ground which is equal. They have, the ground is level. Okay. So the trees growing in the plains have lots of spreading branches. And trees like banyan trees, mango tree, coffee tree, they all grow in the warmer climate of the plains. They grow in the warmer climate of the plains. So many plants also grow in the places where it is hot and wet. Now trees like teak tree, tamarind, rubber tree, coconut tree, pepper tree, tea, coffee and sugarcane grow well in this hot and wet climate. So these trees grow in hot and wet climate. So where there is a heavy rainfall, here they have the heavy rainfall also. And some of the trees are evergreen. Some of the trees are evergreen and some are deciduous. Some are deciduous. So what are deciduous? They shed the leaves in the winter. Okay. So the deciduous trees shed the leaves in the dry season, in summer, to avoid the water loss. Now let's see the plants in marshy places. The plants in marshy places. What is marshy places? Plants in marshy places. So in places they have clayey soil. Do you know clay? Yes. So in some places the soil looks like clay. The soil is clayey. And plenty of water. Can you see the water here? Plenty of water. The water cannot drain. The water cannot drain. The water collects in the soil and covers it. And the mangrove trees grow in such marshy and swampy places. So here also where there is a clayey soil and where there's lot of water, the water does not drain at all. In those places also plants grow. So they are called as mangrove trees. Mangrove, not it is mango, it is mangrove trees. Okay, so therefore, and these they have the roots, they grow above the soil, and the trees which grows in the marshy places, the roots grow above the soil. That's the specialty of these trees. These roots are called as breathing roots. These roots are called as breathing roots. Mangrove trees, where there are plenty of trees, they are called as mangrove trees. The sunlight also will not enter in between. So the tall and thick trees, they are called as mangrove trees. So their roots grow above the soil. So the roots, they are called as breathing roots. The roots are called as breathing roots. Now let's see about the aquatic plants. Aquatic means water. Aquatic means water. So the aquatic plants are floating plants, fixed plants, underwater plants. We have three types of aquatic plants. They are floating plants, fixed plants, underwater plants. So the plants, what are called aquatic plants? What are called aquatic plants? The plants which grow in water. They are called as aquatic plants. The plants which grow in water are called as aquatic plants. So there are three types. How many types? Three types. They are called as floating, fixed and underwater plants. And now let us see one by one in details. Now let's take the first one, floating plants. So what is the meaning of float? Something which floats in the water. That is the meaning of float. So floating plants means the plants which floats in the water. Like the example, duckweed, water lettuce, water hyacinth. So this is duckweed, water lettuce and water hyacinth. So some plants, these plants, they float freely on the top of the water. They float freely on the top of the water. So they are called as floating plants. So they are called as floating plants. So what is the example of floating plants? Duckweed, water lettuce and water hyacinth. So they float very freely on the top of the water, and their bodies are like sponge. They are very soft. Their bodies are like sponge and have empty spaces filled with water and air. So there are empty spaces. Their bodies are like a sponge and have the empty spaces which is filled with air. And this makes the plants light enough. They are very light, so they float in water. So in between these plants they have pores, like, so it is filled with air. So something that makes these plants to float in the water. So they are called as floating plants. Now let us see what are called fixed plants. So fixed plants means they are fixed in one place. Plants like water lily and lotus, they have roots that fix the plants into the bottom of the pond. So where do these flowers grow? In the pond. So they have roots. they have roots. These plants have roots which is fixed at the bottom of the pond and lakes. So they are called as fixed plants. But these plants, they just float and they can move in the water. So they are called as floating plants. Fixed in one place, that is called fixed plants. So examples are water lily and lotus. So they have plate-like leaves. They have plate-like leaves that float on the surface of the water. So here I showed you. Yes. So they have plate-like leaves. Plate-like leaves that floats on the surface of the water. The stomata in the leaves are on the upper side. Normally the stomata is on the bottom side of the leaves. But here the water plants, they have the stomata. The floating leaves have stomata on the upper side. The stems are hollow. The stems are hollow. Hollow means the stems in between, they have a hole like that is called hollow. So the stems are hollow and very light. So this helps the leaves to float. This helps the leaves to float. The stems are very flexible. They bend. Flexible means they can bend this side and that side. So they bend along with the flow of water and make sure that the leaves are always above the water. Okay, so whether the level of water rises or falls in the water body, they always float. And next we'll go to underwater plants. Where is that underwater plants? Yes, underwater plants means it is deep under the water. So plants such as hydrilla. These plants are called as hydrilla. And tape grass. This is called tape grass. So the plants like hydrilla and the tape grass, they live completely under the water. They are totally immersed in the water. They are called submerged or underwater plants. Submerged means totally they are inside the water. So they are called as submerged or the underwater plants. And they have narrow, thin leaves with no stomata. With no stomata. So the plants breathe through their body surface. These plants breathe through their body surface. So the plants absorb the carbon dioxide given out by the animals. So this fish is an animal, it will also breathe, right? So when it is breathing, it gives out carbon dioxide. So those carbon dioxide is used by these underwater plants. So the plants absorb the carbon dioxide given out by the animals which is living in the water. And the stems are flexible and have air spaces. That is why they are floating in the water. So now children, let's end the session here. So remove your textbook and revise the chapter. And we will continue this lesson in the next video. Bye bye children.